Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, Tulsa's source for great gardens, southwoodgardencenter.com, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing. Welcome to Oklahoma Gardening. On today's program, Extension Turfgrass Specialist Dennis Martin identifies the good and bad sedges in the landscape. Extension Specialist Andrina Shufran joins host Casey Hentges to look at mason bees and honeybees. We take a walk through native wildflowers with Extension Range Specialist Laura Goodman. And Bill Farris of Prairie Wind Nursery has tips for growing beautiful Bougainvilleas.
Sedges can play a very important role in many different ecosystems. Many people consider sedges a problem plant or a weed in their home lawn, but under certain circumstances of low maintenance, they may be actually the best plant material to prevent wind and water erosion. Here in this low maintenance shade area, we see one of Oklahoma's many native sedge species. Sedges are a family with several different genera in them and many different species present. It's believed that there's over 70 different sedges native to Oklahoma. What's universal amongst all sedges is a triangular shaped stem in cross section. So if you were to rub the stem of the sedge between your thumb and forefinger and you could feel and observe that it was three-sided, you'd know that you were working with a sedge. Sedges typically form rhizomes, underground stems. In the absence of light, they'll appear white in color, and many sedges form overwintering structures called nutlets, vegetative tubers that allow them to overseason droughts and extremes of condition. They have short or long rhizomes, and they may actually have turf-type characteristics, meaning that they can be mowed and they form a relatively dense, somewhat traffic-tolerant cover, such as what we see here. Over much of Oklahoma, a native sedge called Texas sedge can be found, and there actually are cases where one can purchase it and use it in low maintenance shades. So while this may not be a very dense turfed area, this native rhizomatous sedge here is actually doing a fair job of taking both shade and drought over the years. I would next like to show you an area where we did a demonstration with a turf-type tall fescue in this droughty shade. Initially established the tall fescue with irrigation and fertilization, but then released it to low maintenance conditions. And if you see this area here, and you see the absence of living cover, you've witnessed what can oftentimes happen to tall fescue in a dense, tree-shaded area where the tree competes for moisture and nutrients, and during wet years we'll have bad cases of Rhizoctonia brown patch that kill the tall fescue. Notice the absence of living ground cover in this area here, and just a few small patches of tall fescue survive. So actually in this case we would have been better off with the original native vegetation, a native Oklahoma sedge, which we showed you earlier. So killing out sedges in the dense shade is not always a solution for good ground cover conditions. While native sedges can be a valuable component of low maintenance shaded areas in our landscapes, many people don't like sedges as a part of their highly cultivated lawns. In order to properly manage a lawn and really keep sedge at bay, there are several points I'd like to stress are necessary. First of all, we want to pick a properly adapted vegetation for the site. That means a well-adapted turf grass, one that's got good environmental stress resistance and is known to be well adapted for that site. We also want to properly manage it through regular fertilization, irrigation, and several different pest control procedures. Oftentimes the sedges are worst where the turf grass dies out and is opened up, especially in patches where spring dead spot has struck Bermuda grass, or we've had winter kill of Bermuda grass, or very heavy traffic, or otherwise just not had good turf grass color. Here in this landscape we can see one of those areas. You can see this area lacks good Bermuda grass cover. We have soil exposure, relatively full sun, and look what we have. We have several sedge plants invading this area. So the light coming to the soil surface has really allowed either the sedge seed or the tubers to germinate and compete for space with the desirable turf grass. In this area we could certainly pull out the sedge. We could spray the sedge with a herbicide, but really we need to address the lack of cover. That's the most important thing, and that's the basic of IPM in this situation. Now, once we've got the proper grass in place and we've got good fertilization, irrigation, mowing practices, you may still have a few sedge problems. We might then turn to a herbicide if there's too many sedge plants to pull. There are several herbicide choices. You have to know whether you're working with a cool or a warm season grass. Universally across the board, whether it's cool or warm season turf grass, Basagran as a contact herbicide can be used to kill and suppress yellow nut sedge in either warm or cool season turf. Also, sedge hammer can be used in that capacity on warm or cool season turf grasses. Then there are certain turf grasses for which herbicides have to be specially matched. Products such as Certainty and Monument are very good on both yellow and purple nut sedge, but they can only be used in warm season turf grasses. They would actually be very injurious to cool season turf grasses. So in summary, with sedge control, we want to pick a properly adapted turf grass, get it well established, manage it properly, and then if we still have sedge problems, we can pull just a few of them, but if you need to turn to a herbicide, there are some herbicide products that can work, but as always, we have to read and follow the label in order to get effective and safe sedge control.
There's been a lot of buzz about bees, but when we speak about bees, do we really know what we're talking about? Joining us is Dr. Shufran here at the Insect Zoo, an entomologist with Oklahoma Cooperative Extension. And Dr. Shufran, you're going to talk to us about the differences between mason bees and honeybees. A lot of times we think honeybees are the most important, but
there are a lot of other bees out there. In the United States, there are 4,000 at least different species of bees. And a lot of those are solitary bees that are doing a great deal of work, where honeybees are a big colony, so they're more interested in their whole group together.
Okay.
So honeybees are imported, they're not native, and our mason bees and leafcutter bees are all from this area. They're adapted to this area. They work really hard. Some statistics say twice as hard as honeybees do to pollinate, so they're super important.
Okay, so and behind us we have a mason bee home that you've created, an insect hotel, basically.
Yeah, definitely.
And so what is it that is basically the difference in a home with a honeybee versus a mason bee?
Sure. When most people think of bees, they think of honeybees. So they imagine that bees all live in a big hive together, and it's a little square box, and you can pull the plates out and the whole 9 yards. But most bees live by themselves in a single location, and they lay their eggs separate from all the other bees around.
Okay.
So with the mason bee house that we've built here, it's actually not just for mason bees, but for any of the little solitary bees. And so we've drilled holes and provided holes of all different shapes and sizes so that bees can pick which hole they want to live in and make their nest cavity for their larvae.
Okay.
And what's cool about this, what's so amazing about bees, is the mama mason bee will pick a hole and she'll go in and she'll clean it out, and she will go way to the back and she'll lay an egg. And then she'll go get food for it, and she'll pack it in around the egg.
And what is the food when you...
For some of them are, depending on the solitary bee, some of them are predatory, and they'll pick up little spiders or little caterpillars and those sort of things. They're also, they'll feed on pollen, and that's a protein source, so that helps the larva to grow.
So they pack that in after the egg.
And then they put mud over it, so it's like a little cell all by itself. And they do that over and over again till they get to the front, and then they seal it off extra good.
So one hole could have several eggs in it.
Yeah, it could have 7 or 8 all in a row.
Okay.
And then once she's got that filled up, she'll go and make more and more holes until she dies. But what's so cool is that instead of the first one that was laid hatching first, the last one that was laid hatches first and eats her way out, and then the second one eats her way out. So it's in reverse order from how they were laid in there. And nobody knows how they can do that.
So when we see some of those holes that are covered over, are those eggs in there?
Yeah, those holes that we have drilled are about 5 inches long. So they'll probably hold anywhere from 4 to 8 cells. And right now, all the ones that you can see that are plugged are the ones that have larvae in them that are growing and eating and hopefully will soon emerge. If they look really bright and fresh, that's for sure this year's. Some of them will look kind of dull and sort of caved in. Those are last year's. We even had some that were alive and working in late fall, October, November. We were still seeing some of the bees going out. So they go almost all year round. If they fill up all of those, what we can do is go through with a pipe cleaner. And when in the middle of the winter, when everything's dead, we can clean all those out and they'll start them again.
Oh, okay, all right.
We don't have to drill all new holes. We just have to tidy the house and they'll come back.
Get out some of that remaining food and mud and things like that.
Exactly. And some of the larger holes are for larger species of bees. And then some of the smaller holes would be for the really small sweat bees and tiny bees that you get. We have such a diversity of bees you just wouldn't believe.
If you wanted to build your own insect hotel, what are some factors you want to consider?
Great. There are several that you need to keep in mind. Bees are very picky about which direction they like their holes to open towards. They like to face the holes east. So you want everything facing towards the east, and that protects them from the late afternoon sun, gives them morning sun and keeps them cool in the afternoon. They don't like to be down near the ground because those are predators and ants and things that will bother them. So the hotels should be about 4 feet and up, and they can go up as high as you feel comfortable with. And then the size of the hole you want to be from a quarter of an inch all the way through to a 1/2 inch with every little increment in between. So you have to buy a whole new drill set, which makes every man happy.
There you go. Now, what about the plants that are related, to the bees? Are they the same sort of pollinator plants you would use for bees across the, honeybees and solitary bees, or would you use something different?
If you're planning to make a garden that's going to be happy for bees, that's going to be most attractive for native bees, then you want to use native plants. A honeybee will pretty much take anything that it likes and it looks good. These guys are more programmed to recognize things that have always been here, that they've sort of grown up with over the millennia. And then they're also very good at garden pollination for fruits and vegetables, those sort of things, because most of those flowers are fairly large and non-specific. So they can get in there and collect the pollen as well as any other bee. And that gives you more fruit, more tomatoes, more squash.
Thank you for sharing this information on bees.
My pleasure.
As Oklahomans, we can't help but notice the beautiful wildflowers that are blooming in the spring. And I know as a gardener, I'm always looking at the beautiful flowers and trying to figure out what they are. Joining us today is Dr. Laura Goodman, who is an extension range specialist with the Natural Resource Ecology and Management Department. And this is your specialty, is range management. Can you first tell us what range really is? I mean, it's behind us here, but what is the definition of range?
So range is really just land that isn't cultivated for any use. And so we typically find these lands in areas that have either sandy soils or rocky soils, or there's some reason that land isn't suitable for growing crops. These lands typically have native vegetation, so they're going to have native plants. And so that's what we're going to look at today is the wildflowers that you might find in a pasture that has a native range system.
Yeah, because a lot of these plants are becoming popular within the horticulture industry and they're sold commercially, like this one here in front of us. This is Baptisia. Can you tell us about kind of what it means to find it out in the range and maybe what it tells you about the land here?
So you're right, this is Baptisia. Wild blue indigo is what some people call it. This plant is really well adapted to almost any kind of soil, so you could find it across the state. It is in the pea family. It's a legume, and so these plants are really important as seed sources for turkey, bobwhite quail. They're all going to consume the seeds after these have put on their pods.
Laura, there's so much diversity out here. It looks like we've got some primrose here. Is this primrose?
So it looks quite a bit like primrose. So there's a showy evening primrose that you see a lot along the ditches. It's a purple flower that you see. This is actually light poppy mallow, so it's in a different family, but it looks a lot like that showy evening primrose.
Oh, okay. All right. And here is the rayless gaillardia.
Yeah,
I love this one.
This is such a neat plant. So this gaillardia is really similar to Indian blanket. It's just missing those petals or the ray flowers that Indian blanket has. So here we have another one that's related to that light poppy mallow. This is also in the mallow family, and it's called cowboy rose or wine cup. And it gets the name wine cup from that real rich color that it has on the petals. It has five petals generally, and this is a trailing plant, and so it'll trail along the ground, but it doesn't put roots down as it trails. Here's the leaves. You can see they're real distinctive, lobed and kind of hand-shaped leaves. This plant has a carrot-like tuber underground, and so if you already had it in your garden, you could spread it to different areas by digging up that and spreading it and planting it in another area. Otherwise, you can always buy seed. They're definitely available commercially. So.
Definitely one that pops in all the green here.
Oh yeah.
Well, let's go see what else we can find.
Okay. So Casey, here we have beard tongue penstemon. And we have a couple of different penstemon that grow in Oklahoma. This one and Oklahoma penstemon are ones that you'll commonly see. Oklahoma penstemon has smaller flowers than this and more linear leaves. These have a little bit broader leaf, but these beard tongue penstemon sure are beautiful.
Those are gorgeous. I would imagine hummingbirds would like those and things like that with that tubular flower.
Yeah, definitely.
We've got a few others around here too.
All right.
And it looks like a Mexican hat. I mean, these are some of the ones that we have in horticulture.
Yeah. So another plant that has kind of a cone flower here with the petals down below, and then it has that these real distinct leaves with the deep lobes that you can see here.
So Laura, a lot of these that we've looked at are herbaceous wildflowers. Are there any shrubs that are of value and importance?
Yeah, there's some that are flowering right now.
Oh, let's go look.
Okay.
It looks like a dogwood.
Yeah, so it is a dogwood. You know, these shrub species are really important in rangelands. They provide cover for deer, for quail, for turkey, for all sorts of different wildlife species. And so, you know, dogwood, plum, these are sumac, these are all really important to keep in our rangeland systems and have, you know, at least small areas that have thick woody cover, you know, to protect them from different predators, especially some of these ground nesting birds from hawks and owls, that kind of thing.
So I saw another one that we see a lot in the landscape industry, the buttonbush.
Yeah, so buttonbush is another really important cover plant for wildlife species, and you'll see it in rangelands. especially sometimes around water.
Okay, because in the landscape industry, we tend to use it in wet areas as well. So it's fascinating, and thank you for sharing with us, you know, the value of plants both in rangeland and also how we use them in the horticulture industry as well.
Yeah.
I want to also mention to our viewers that it's important not to go out into the rangeland and dig these up.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot of them won't transplant well because of the taproot and stuff, correct?
Yeah, so a lot of these plants is really best to just start from seed. You know, when you transplant them from the native environment that they're in, sometimes it's an adjustment with the soils, changes in soils, and the taproots can be damaged fairly easily, so you're right.
And most of them are so available commercially that there's really no point to do that. Well, thank you for joining us and sharing this with us, Dr. Goodman.
Thank you.
You've probably seen these beautiful Bougainvillea hanging baskets, and if you've bought one, you might have struggled to keep it looking so beautiful as the day you purchased it. Well, we're here at Prairie Wind Nursery in Norman, and joining us is Bill Farris. And Bill, you've got the secret on how to keep these beautiful Bougainvilleas beautiful. How do you do it?
Well, it's really not that much of a secret, but the most important thing is cultivar selection. These Bougainvilleas, some varieties are more sensitive to the day length or the changes in the day length than other varieties. The older varieties that were originally from Central and South America, are where the days don't change a lot, will not bloom up here in our long days of summer.
Okay.
So the blooms won't initiate. So over the years we've gone through and found some varieties that are less sensitive to that. We've got about a half a dozen different varieties that will bloom throughout the summer. Now they still bloom in flushes. You'll get more blooms and less blooms, but they should still continue to bloom throughout the season.
So yours are more day neutral versus some of those that might be shipped in even from the southern states.
Exactly.
They might be day length requirements.
Right, and they'll bloom in Florida or South Texas through the winter just fine, but they're not going to bloom up here in our long days of the summer.
Okay, all right. Well, and so what else do you do? I mean, you mentioned that they do bloom on new growth, so that's important to know.
That's right. You want to keep them in a thriving and a vigorously growing mode because they do bloom on the new growth. So if they're not growing, if they're stressed out, they're not going to be putting on any new blooms or bracts as they actually are. You know, watering is a critical part of that. You want them to go through a sort of a wet, dry cycle. You water them thoroughly when you do water them. But like this one, if you can tell, is beginning to droop slightly. It's beginning to just show a little tiny bit of wilt, and that's the perfect time to re-water that. And then you want to water it until water is running through the pot, and so that you know that you've got plenty of water in there. And then leave it alone until it starts to wilt just slightly again.
And so you can tell by the weight of the pot, and the leaves are a little bit limp on the ends.
They start to droop out on the ends. Yes, that's right. The other critical factor is the fertility. Now, we like to recommend the Nelson's Nutristar Bougainvillea fertilizer. It's got a lot of the micronutrients in there to keep it blooming well. But in addition to that, and this fertilizer has the magnesium in it, but the Epsom salts is always is great to help to keep them. A couple of tablespoons every couple of weeks will really help to keep the blooms coming on your Bougainvilleas through the summertime.
So Bill, if they bloom on the new growth, does that mean we have to just keep letting them grow all summer long, or can we maintain them a little bit?
Well, the best thing to do is do a little selective pruning, and this I think would be a good example here. You would want to take out the longer trailing vines and then leave the shorter growth, and like this break right here, cut it right ahead of this, and that this will flush out then and start to bloom real quickly.
Okay.
So you can maintain it by selective pruning.
And obviously they are going to get bigger. Would you recommend somebody repot it out of a hanging basket, or this size pot anyway?
For instance, this patio pot, this is about a 14-inch terracotta pot. We grow them in hanging baskets because it's free space in the greenhouse. It doesn't take up bench space, but ideally you would want to put it in a larger pot, especially if it's a deck plant or a patio pot, a pool deck or something like that. You want it down below eye level where you can see it. You're looking down on it rather than up at the bottom of the nursery pot. Right.
Well, and you've got quite a few here. Can you tell us about some of these that you have?
Sure. This variety is Juanita Hatton, and in my estimation is the measure that all Bougainvilleas should be measured by. It's the best bloomer. of course, very heat tolerant. It's a more compact, a little bit more shrubby type, doesn't have such long trailing blooms. The white one next to you there is Imperial Thai. Now it comes out as a pure white and then fades into a pink blush. This one's just starting that. It'll get a lot darker than that as the blooms mature. For those folks that like one that's a little better behaved, this is Raspberry Ice, the variegated varieties, and they're not quite as vigorous as the green leaf variety. So if you want something that takes up a little less space and doesn't get quite so carried away, that's a good selection. This is Sundown Orange. If you like the pink, peach, or orange colors, this is one that's really good, performs well up here in Oklahoma.
This one's just gorgeous. I mean, it's got huge bracts on it. And these are bracts, right? Not petals.
They are bracts. This is the flower. Here's your flower.
Okay.
And then this is the bract. Just
which is like a modified leaf.
It is, yes.
All right.
But all of these varieties perform well up here in Oklahoma.
Well, they obviously are performing well here, and they look beautiful, and thank you for sharing your secret with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Next week, we are making a splash with a trip to Pond Pro Shop to look at new products for pond owners and examine the differences between koi and goldfish. We visit a hidden outdoor gym in Oklahoma City, and turfgrass specialist Justin Moss has tips to keep our lawns looking good during the hot summer months. So join us then for more TV You'll Grow to Love. To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We wish to thank our generous underwriters, Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is provided by Pond Pro Shops, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, and the Oklahoma Horticultural Society. We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.